You are trapped inside your own head. You replay old arguments. You invent future disasters. And you analyze every detail until you are paralyzed. Overthinking feels like problem solving, but it is a lie. It is a defense mechanism your brain uses to avoid taking real-world action. And while you sit there thinking, your actual life is passing you by. You know this feeling. It's 3:07 a.m. Your body is exhausted, but your mind refuses to shut down. You shift in bed. You turn the pillow. You close your eyes harder, as if pressure will force silence. It doesn't. Instead, your brain starts playing a familiar game. It replays a conversation from earlier in the day. Something small. Something that should be irrelevant by now. But your mind slows it down, zooms in, rewrites it. You think about what you should have said, what they might have meant, what they might be thinking about you right now. And then, without warning, it jumps forward. Now you're imagining a future scenario, a mistake you haven't made yet, a conversation that hasn't happened, a problem that doesn't exist. But your body reacts as if it's real. Your chest tightens. Your breathing becomes shallow. You feel the weight of something that hasn't even occurred. Think about that. You are physically exhausted because of events that only exist inside your head. And this isn't just happening at night. It follows you into your day. You sit down to work. You open your laptop. You know exactly what needs to be done. But instead of starting, you hesitate. You tell yourself, let me just think this through first. So you plan. You analyze. You consider every possible angle. 10 minutes pass. Then 20. Then 45. You haven't started. Not because you're lazy, but because your brain has convinced you that thinking is progress. Let me give you a simple, uncomfortable scenario. You pick up your phone for just a minute. You check one notification, then another, then something pulls your attention. You scroll. Your brain tells you, I'll just reset for a second before I get back to work. But when you finally look up, an hour is gone. And here's the worst part. You don't feel rested. You feel more scattered, more irritated, more behind. So now you go back to your task with even less mental clarity than before. And the cycle repeats. This is the modern mental state. Constant stimulation, constant input, constant low-level anxiety running in the background. You are never fully at rest, but you are rarely fully engaged. You exist in this strange middle ground where your brain is always active but rarely effective. Let me ask you something. When was the last time your mind felt truly quiet? Not distracted, not numbed, but genuinely still. For most people, that moment is hard to remember, because silence has been replaced by noise, and not just external noise, internal noise, endless thoughts, unresolved loops, simulated conversations. Imagine futures. Your brain has become a place you can't escape from. And over time, this creates a very specific kind of exhaustion. Not physical exhaustion. Cognitive exhaustion. The kind where you wake up tired, even after a full night of sleep. The kind where you finish a day and feel like you've been busy but can't point to anything meaningful you've actually done. The kind where your attention feels fractured. You try to focus, But part of your mind is always somewhere else. Thinking, replaying, projecting. And here's what makes this even more dangerous. From the outside, your life can look completely normal. You go to work. You respond to messages. You handle responsibilities. But internally, there is constant friction. Every decision feels heavier than it should. Every task feels more complicated. Every moment of stillness gets filled with unnecessary thought. So you start to avoid stillness altogether. You reach for your phone. You turn on something in the background. You keep yourself mentally occupied not because you need stimulation, but because you're trying to escape your own thinking. Let that sink in. You are not overwhelmed by your life. You are overwhelmed by your interpretation of it. And the longer this continues, the more it shapes your behavior. You hesitate more. You delay more. You second-guess more. Opportunities pass. Conversations stay unspoken. Decisions get postponed. Not because you lack capability, but because your mind is constantly negotiating instead of acting. And this creates a quiet form of regret. Not the loud, dramatic kind, but the slow, creeping realization that time is moving and you are still stuck in the same mental patterns. Still thinking. Still analyzing. Still waiting. While your actual life continues forward without you. Most people believe their problem is stress. They think they are overwhelmed because life is demanding, because responsibilities are piling up, because there is simply too much to handle. But that's not the real issue. The real issue is this. You've been taught, directly or indirectly, that thinking harder will solve your problems. That if you just analyze long enough, plan carefully enough, mentally simulate every possible outcome, you will eventually arrive at a perfect, risk-free decision. It sounds intelligent. It feels responsible. But it is fundamentally flawed. Because your brain is not designed to give you clarity through endless thought. In fact, under certain conditions, it does the opposite. Let me introduce you to something most people have never heard of, but experience every single day. It's called the default mode network. The DMN. This is a network in your brain that becomes active when you are not focused on a specific task. When you're lying in bed. When you're sitting in silence. When your attention drifts. And here's what it does. It scans your past for mistakes. It scans your future for threats. It is not neutral. It is biased toward negativity. Because from an evolutionary perspective, your brain is not trying to make you happy. It is trying to keep you alive. And for most of human history, survival meant anticipating danger. So the brain developed a system that constantly asks, what went wrong? What could go wrong? What should I have done differently? What should I avoid next time? Now, in a world of immediate physical threats, this system was useful. But in modern life, it becomes distorted. Because the threats are no longer lions or predators. They are social, psychological, and often imagined. A conversation, a decision, a possibility. And the DMN treats all of them as if they require urgent analysis. So when your brain is idle, it doesn't rest. It works. It replays. It predicts. It constructs scenarios. And here's where the trap begins. The more you engage with these thoughts, the more real they feel. The more real they feel, the more attention you give them. And the more attention you give them, the stronger the loop becomes. This is not random. This is conditioning. Neuroplasticity is always active. Every time you choose to stay inside your head instead of taking action, you reinforce a pattern. You are training your brain to associate thinking with safety and action with risk. Think about that. You are not just overthinking. You are practicing overthinking. And over time, it becomes automatic. Now here's the part most people misunderstand. Overthinking does not feel like avoidance. It feels like effort. It feels like you are doing something productive. You are working through it. You are being careful. You are trying to get it right. But underneath all of that, there is a deeper mechanism at play. Your brain is trying to reduce uncertainty. And one of the easiest ways to create the illusion of control is to think, because thinking simulates action. It allows you to mentally rehearse scenarios without exposing yourself to real-world consequences. And when you do that, your brain gives you a small reward, a subtle release of dopamine, not the kind you get from achievement, but the kind you get from anticipation, from feeling like you are on the verge of solving something. This is where it becomes dangerous, because now, thinking is not just a habit. It is rewarding. You sit there, running through possibilities, and your brain tells you, stay here. You're getting closer. But you're not. You're looping. You're circling the same thoughts with slightly different angles. You're not solving the problem. You're maintaining it. Let me ask you something. How many times have you thought about the same issue from different perspectives on different days and still not taken action? That's not problem solving. That's rumination. And rumination has a very specific effect on your cognitive system. It increases mental load. Every unresolved thought occupies space in your working memory. Your brain becomes crowded, not with useful information, but with unfinished loops. And this is why you feel mentally exhausted, even when you haven't done anything physically demanding, because your brain is processing constantly, switching between past and future, between regret and anxiety. And every switch comes with a cost. This is called the switching cost. Every time your attention shifts, your brain burns energy. So when you are stuck in overthinking, your brain is essentially multitasking, internally, running multiple simulations at once. And the result is predictable. Reduced clarity, reduced focus, reduced execution. This is why you can spend an entire day thinking about what to do and end the day feeling drained with nothing to show for it. Because your brain has been active but not effective. And here is the uncomfortable truth. The smarter you are, the more vulnerable you are to this trap, because you have a greater capacity to generate possibilities, more angles, more interpretations, more hypothetical outcomes, which means more loops, more hesitation, more internal noise. Intelligence, without discipline, becomes a liability. It turns inward. It becomes self-consuming. And instead of building your life, it starts analyzing it to death. Let that land. You cannot think your way out of overthinking, because thinking is the very mechanism that sustains it. At some point, the solution stops being cognitive and becomes behavioral. Not more analysis, not more insight, but interruption, a break in the loop, And most people never do this. They stay inside their heads, believing that the next thought will be the one that sets them free. It won't, because the system itself is designed to keep you there, quietly active, endlessly processing, and completely stuck. There's a common assumption that calm, clear thinking comes from a calm, stable life. That if your environment were less chaotic, if people were more predictable, if pressure were reduced, then your mind would finally settle. But history gives us a very different example. Marcus Aurelius did not live a quiet life. He ruled the Roman Empire during one of its most unstable periods. War on multiple fronts. A devastating plague sweeping through the population. Political betrayal from those closest to him. He carried the weight of millions of lives on his decisions. And yet, he did not collapse into overthinking. He did not spiral into endless analysis. He did not sit awake at night replaying every possible outcome. Instead, he developed something far more dangerous. Clarity without emotional attachment. Think about that. Not numbness, not suppression, but separation. He understood something most people never realize. Your thoughts are not instructions. They are suggestions, and most of them are unreliable. So instead of trusting every thought that entered his mind, he filtered them relentlessly. He asked one simple question over and over again. Is this within my control? If the answer was yes, he acted. If the answer was no, he let it go. Not later. Not after more thinking. Immediately. This is not philosophy. This is behavioral discipline. Because what Marcus Aurelius refused to do was negotiate with uncertainty. And this is where most people get trapped. You try to resolve what cannot be resolved. You try to control what cannot be controlled. So your brain keeps working, searching, simulating, looping. But Marcus did something different. He cut the loop at its source. Let me give you a more concrete picture. Imagine receiving news that a trusted ally has betrayed you. For most people, this becomes a mental storm. Why did they do it? What did I miss? How could I have prevented this? What does this mean going forward? The mind explodes into analysis. But Marcus would reduce it to something much simpler. The event has already happened. It is outside of your control. The only thing left is your response. So instead of replaying the betrayal, he would redirect his attention to action. What needs to be done now? Not what could have been done. Not what might happen. Now, this level of detachment is not natural. It is trained because your brain wants to hold on. It wants to revisit. It wants to extract certainty from uncertainty. But certainty is often unavailable. And the longer you chase it, the more energy you lose. Marcus Aurelius protected his attention like a resource because he understood something critical. Your attention is your life. Where it goes, your experience follows. So he built systems to manage it. One of the most powerful was writing, what we now call journaling. But for him, it wasn't emotional expression. It was cognitive correction. He used writing to confront his own thinking, to strip it down, to remove exaggeration, to eliminate unnecessary emotion. He would take a complex situation and reduce it to facts, not stories, not interpretations. Facts, Because facts are manageable. Stories are infinite. Let me ask you something. When you think about your problems, are you dealing with facts? Or are you dealing with narratives your mind has constructed? Because most of your stress does not come from reality. It comes from interpretation. Marcus trained himself to see clearly, and clarity removes noise. Noise is what fuels overthinking. Now here's the part that matters most. He did not wait to feel ready. He did not wait for emotional alignment. He acted based on principle, not mood. This is where modern thinking has drifted. You've been conditioned to believe that you need to feel certain before you act, that you need confidence, that you need clarity. But Marcus operated in reverse. Action created clarity, not the other way around. And because of that, he avoided the trap you were stuck in. He did not sit in loops. He moved. Even when the situation was imperfect. Even when the outcome was uncertain. Because he understood something deeply practical. Indecision is more damaging than imperfect action. Think about your own life. How many situations have remained unresolved? Not because they were impossible, but because you kept thinking instead of acting? That email you didn't send. That decision you delayed. That conversation you avoided. Not because you didn't know what to do, but because you kept searching for a better option, a cleaner path, a safer move. Marcus would have seen that clearly, and he would have rejected it, not emotionally, logically, because every moment spent in unnecessary thought is a moment not spent shaping reality. And this is the difference. He lived in the real world. Most people live in simulations of it. You run scenarios in your head. He executed in the environment in front of him. You analyze possibilities. He responded to facts. Let me ask you something. Are you trying to understand your life? Or are you trying to control it without engaging with it? Because those are not the same. And one of them will keep you stuck indefinitely. Marcus Aurelius did not eliminate difficulty. He eliminated excess thinking about difficulty. And in doing so, he preserved something most people lose. Mental energy directed toward action, not consumed by rumination. That is the standard, not perfection, not constant calm, but disciplined clarity, and the willingness to act without waiting for your mind to feel comfortable. There's a reason you keep falling back into overthinking. Not occasionally, not randomly, consistently. And it's not because you lack discipline. It's not because you're weak. It's because you are operating inside a system you don't even realize exists. Most people believe their thoughts are spontaneous, that they just happen. But your behavior follows a structure, a loop. And once you see it clearly, you won't be able to unsee it. It starts with a trigger. Something small, almost invisible. An email that feels slightly off. A message that doesn't get a reply. A decision you need to make. A moment of uncertainty. Nothing dramatic. But your brain detects it as a potential problem. And immediately, it moves to the next phase. Craving. Not for pleasure. For control. Your brain wants resolution. It wants certainty. It wants to close the gap between what is and what might happen. And since real-world action involves risk-effort, exposure your brain looks for a safer alternative. So it gives you one. Thinking. You start analyzing. You replay the email. You reread the message. You imagine different interpretations. You try to predict outcomes. If I say this, they might respond like that. If I wait, maybe it will resolve itself. What if I make the wrong move? And here's the key. While you are doing this, it feels like progress, because mentally, you are engaged. You are not ignoring the problem. You are working on it. But in reality, you haven't moved at all. This is the response phase of the loop. Overthinking as action. And now comes the most deceptive part, the reward. Your brain gives you a small release of relief. Not because the problem is solved, but because you are simulating control. You feel like you are getting closer, like you are almost there, and that feeling is enough to keep you in the loop. Think about that. You are being rewarded for not acting. A subtle hit of dopamine, just enough to reinforce the behavior, not enough to create satisfaction. So you stay, you keep thinking, and the loop resets. Trigger, craving, response, reward, again, and again, and again. Now here's where it becomes dangerous. This loop starts to replace real-world engagement. Instead of making decisions, you simulate them. Instead of taking risks, you calculate them endlessly. Instead of learning through action, you try to predict your way to certainty. But certainty never arrives, because life doesn't operate on complete information. So your brain keeps searching, and searching, and searching. Let me give you a simple, familiar situation. You need to send an important email. You open it. You start writing. Then you stop. You reread the first sentence. You adjust the tone. You change a word. You rethink the entire structure. You imagine how the other person will read it. You question whether it sounds confident enough, or too aggressive, or too passive. So you pause. I'll come back to it. An hour later, you're still thinking about it. Not writing. Thinking. And by the end of the day, it's still unsent. Not because it was difficult, but because your brain kept you in the loop. This is how opportunities disappear. Not through failure. Through delay. Now zoom out. This isn't just about emails. It's about decisions. Career moves. Health choices. Conversations that matter. All of them get pulled into the same system. And over time, something subtle begins to happen. Your brain starts to prefer thinking over doing. Because thinking is safe. It carries no immediate consequences. No rejection. No failure. No exposure. Just controlled simulation. But the cost is hidden. Because while you are inside your head, your life is happening outside of it. Time is moving. Opportunities are shifting. People are making decisions. And you are still processing. Let me ask you something. How many things in your life are still in progress inside your mind, but completely inactive in reality? Think about that. Projects, ideas, changes you said you would make. Still there. Still unresolved. Not because you forgot, but because you never exited the loop. And here's the final layer. The more you repeat this cycle, the more automatic it becomes. Your brain stops even presenting action as a primary option. It defaults to thinking. Immediately, without question, this is conditioning. You have trained yourself to hesitate, to analyze, to delay. And now it feels like your natural state. But it's not. It's learned. And anything learned can be unlearned. But only if you recognize the system. Only if you interrupt it. Because if you don't, this loop will quietly shape your entire life. Not through dramatic failure, but through slow, consistent inaction, missed chances, unmade decisions, unlived potential, all replaced by one thing: endless thought that leads nowhere. And most people never notice this. They think they are being careful. They think they are being intelligent. They think they are preparing. But they are not. They are stuck in a system that rewards hesitation and punishes action. And unless you break it, it will keep running. Silently, efficiently, indefinitely. At this point, you understand the problem. You understand the loop. You understand the illusion. You understand that thinking is not the solution. But insight alone does not change behavior. You don't break mental patterns by understanding them. You break them by replacing them. So what you need now is a system, not motivation, not inspiration. A system that forces your brain out of abstraction and into reality. This is what I call the externalization system. And its purpose is simple: to remove thoughts from your head and convert them into decisions and actions. Because as long as your problems stay internal, they remain infinite. The moment they become external, they become manageable. Let's walk through this carefully. Not as theory, but as something you can apply immediately. The first step is extraction. You take everything that is currently circulating in your mind and you put it somewhere visible. On paper, in a notebook, on a blank document. It doesn't matter where. What matters is that it leaves your head. And you do this without filtering. No organizing. No prioritizing. No trying to make sense of it yet. Just dump it. Every concern. Every unfinished thought. Every scenario. Every what if. Because right now, your brain is overloaded. It is holding too many open loops. And each loop consumes cognitive energy. This is cognitive load. Your working memory has limits. And when those limits are exceeded, clarity disappears. So this first step is not about solving anything. It's about relief. You are freeing up mental space. You are telling your brain, you don't need to hold this anymore. And almost immediately, something shifts. Not because your problems are gone, but because they are no longer compressed into a chaotic internal state. They are now visible, defined, contained. The second step is separation. This is where most people fail, because they skip it. You take everything you wrote down and you divide it into 2 categories. Not 5, not 10. 2. Controllable action. Uncontrollable noise. Nothing else. And you have to be strict here, because your brain will try to blur the line. It will try to pull things from noise back into action just to keep thinking about them. So you ask a very direct question for each item. Is there a specific physical action I can take on this? Not a thought. Not a plan. Not a possibility. An action. Something observable. Something you can start. If the answer is yes, it goes into controllable action. If the answer is no, it goes into uncontrollable noise. And this is where clarity begins to emerge. Because most of what you think about falls into the second category. Things you cannot control. Other people's opinions. Future outcomes. Past events. Uncertain variables. All of it noise. And yet, this is where your brain spends most of its energy. Think about that. Now comes the third step. Execution. This is where the system separates you from your old pattern. You take one item from a controllable action list. Not all of them. One. And you act on it immediately. Not after more thinking. Not after refining the plan. Now, because action is the interruption. It is the only thing that breaks the loop. And the action does not need to be perfect. In fact, it shouldn't be, because perfection is what pulled you into overthinking in the first place. The goal here is movement. You are retraining your brain. You are showing it that resolution comes from doing, not thinking. Let me give you a simple example. You've been thinking about starting a workout routine, analyzing schedules, researching programs, comparing options, all thinking. In this system, that stops. Your action is simple. Put on your shoes. Do 10 minutes. That's it. Because once you start, the loop is broken, and your brain begins to recalibrate. The fourth step is elimination. This is the part most people resist. You look at the uncontrollable noise list, and you do something uncomfortable. You let it go, not by solving it, but by refusing to engage with it, because there is nothing to solve. And your brain will push back. It will say, but this matters. But I need to think about this. But what if something goes wrong? That's the addiction. The need to stay mentally involved. But involvement is not control. So you train yourself to disengage. Not emotionally. Behaviorally. You notice the thought and you do not follow it. You redirect your attention. Again and again. Until the loop weakens. This is neuroplasticity in action. You are literally rewiring your brain's default response. The fifth step is constraint. You limit how much time you are allowed to think. Because right now, your thinking is unbounded. It expands to fill any available space. So you give it a boundary. 10 minutes. 15 at most. A defined window where you are allowed to think, analyze, plan. And when that time ends, you stop, even if you feel unfinished. Especially if you feel unfinished. Because the goal is not completion. The goal is control. You are teaching your brain that thinking is a tool, not a place to live. Now, let's address the resistance. Because it will show up. You will feel the urge to go back, to think a little more, to refine a little more, to wait a little longer, and it will sound reasonable. That's what makes it dangerous. But you have to see it clearly. That voice is not trying to help you. It is trying to keep you safe. And safety, in this context, means inaction. So you move anyway, imperfectly, uncertainly, but deliberately. Let me ask you something. What would your life look like if every thought you had was either turned into action or consciously discarded? No middle ground. No endless processing. Just decision. Just movement. That is what the system creates. Not a perfect life, but a functional one, a directed one, a life where your mind supports your actions instead of replacing them. Because at the end of the day, clarity is not something you find. It is something that emerges after you begin. And most people never experience that because they never begin. Now slow down for a moment. No frameworks, no systems, no instructions, just you and the pattern you've been living inside. Because this is the part most people avoid. Not because it's complicated, but because it's honest. Let me ask you something. Are you using your mind as a tool to build your life or as a place to hide from it? Think carefully, because overthinking often disguises itself as intelligence. It makes you feel engaged. It makes you feel responsible. It makes you feel like you're doing the work. But if you look at your actual life, what has it produced? Not your intentions, not your ideas, your results. How many decisions have you delayed not because you lacked information, but because you kept searching for certainty? How many times have you told yourself, I just need to think about this a little more, and then days passed, weeks passed. Nothing changed? Be honest, because this is where the illusion breaks. You are not stuck because life is unclear. You are stuck because you are unwilling to move without clarity. And those are not the same. Let me ask you something more direct. What are you currently avoiding? Not in general. Specifically, the conversation you haven't had, the decision you haven't made, the step you keep postponing. You know exactly what it is. You don't need more time to think about it. You need to confront it. And here's the uncomfortable layer beneath that. If nothing changes, if you continue thinking the same way, delaying the same actions, looping through the same patterns, where does this lead? Not in a week, not in a month, 5 years. What does your life actually look like? The same unresolved decisions, the same mental noise, the same quiet frustration, just older, just heavier. Think about that. Because time does not pause while you figure things out. It moves, with or without your participation. And overthinking creates a very specific kind of regret. Not the regret of failure, but the regret of inaction. The slow realization that you could have acted, you could have tried, you could have moved, but you stayed inside your head instead. Let me ask you one more question. When you are alone in silence with no distractions, what does your mind do? Does it create? Does it direct? Or does it replay, worry, and fragment your attention? Because that is your baseline. That is the system you are living with every day. And if you don't take control of it, it will continue to shape your decisions for you. Quietly, automatically, until one day, you look back and realize you didn't need more intelligence. You needed more courage to act without it feeling perfect. At this point, there is no confusion left. You understand the pattern. You see the loop. You know exactly where you're getting stuck. So now, this becomes a decision, not an idea, not a concept, a decision. Because from here, there are only two paths available to you. The first is the one you already know. You go back into your head. You keep analyzing. You keep refining. You keep waiting for clarity. You tell yourself, tomorrow I'll be more decisive. Next week I'll have a better plan. Soon I'll be ready. But nothing changes because the system doesn't change. You remain in the loop, comfortable, safe, inactive, and slowly your life starts to reflect that, not through dramatic collapse, but through quiet stagnation. The same problems, the same delays, the same mental conversations repeating themselves in slightly different forms. This is what most people choose, not consciously, but by default. Now the second path is less comfortable. It is less certain, and it requires something most people avoid. Discipline, not motivation, not excitement. Discipline. The willingness to act without perfect clarity. The willingness to move while your mind is still questioning. The willingness to accept that your first step will be incomplete and to take it anyway. Because here's the truth most people spend years avoiding. You do not need more time to think. You need a higher tolerance for imperfection. Let that land. Because perfection is a shield your mind uses to keep you still. It tells you, wait until you're sure. Wait until it's clear. Wait until it feels right. But clarity does not come before action. It comes after. Always. So the longer you wait, the longer you stay confused. And the longer you stay confused, the more you think. And the loop continues. Discipline breaks that loop, not once, but repeatedly, in small, controlled moments. You choose to act when your instinct is to hesitate. You choose to start when your mind says wait. You choose to finish something even if it's imperfect. This is how you retrain your brain, not through theory, through evidence. Every time you act, you send a signal. I don't need to think more. I need to move. And over time, that becomes your new default. Action over analysis. Execution over simulation. Reality over imagination. But this shift does not happen passively. It requires force, not external force. Internal. You have to interrupt yourself. In real time. When you notice the loop starting, when you feel the pull to analyze, when you catch yourself delaying something simple, you stop. And you act. Immediately. Not later. Because later is where the loop rebuilds itself. Let me make this practical. Right now, there is something in your life you have been thinking about. Something unresolved. Something you've been circling. You know what it is. Don't generalize it. Name it. And now ask yourself, what is the smallest physical action I can take on this in the next 10 minutes? Not the full solution. The first move. Then do it. Not after this video. Not after you think about it again. Now. Because this is the moment where everything changes. Or nothing does. And understand this clearly. Discipline is not restriction. It is control. It is the ability to direct your attention. Instead of being controlled by it, it is the ability to act instead of simulate. It is the ability to live in reality instead of being trapped in your own mind. And if you don't build this, your mind will continue to run the same patterns. Quietly, automatically, relentlessly, you'll keep thinking, keep planning, keep waiting, while your life moves forward without your full participation. So this is the line. not dramatic, not emotional, but real. You either continue negotiating with your thoughts or you start overriding them. You either stay in the loop or you step out of it. And the only way out is through action. There's something you need to see clearly before we close this. The environment you live in is not neutral. It is engineered. Your attention is being competed for constantly. Every app, every notification, every piece of content, designed to pull you back into passive consumption and away from deliberate action. And overthinking fits perfectly into this system. Because while you are stuck in your head, you are not building anything. You are not creating. You are not executing. You are not moving forward. You are paused. And a paused mind is easy to capture, easy to distract, easy to influence, easy to control. Think about that. The more time you spend in mental loops, the less resistance you have against external noise. Your focus weakens. Your standards drop. Your decisions become reactive instead of intentional. And this is not dramatic. It's gradual. So gradual you don't notice it happening. Until one day, you realize something uncomfortable. You've been busy for years, but not effective. You've been thinking constantly, but not progressing. You've been present, but not truly engaged in your own life. And here's the truth most people avoid. Inaction is not neutral. It is decline. Because while you are standing still, everything around you is moving. Opportunities close. Time compounds. Other people act. And you are left with the same thoughts you had yesterday. Just heavier. Just more familiar. So this is not about improving your mindset. It is about reclaiming control. Because if you don't take control of your attention, something else will. Now this is where everything either becomes real or stays theoretical. Because understanding is easy. You've understood many things before. You've had insights before. You've told yourself, this makes sense. I need to change. And then what happened? Nothing. The pattern returned. The loop restarted. The same behaviors quietly took over again. So this is not about what you know. It's about what you do immediately after this moment. Because right now, you are standing at a very precise point. You can feel the truth of what we've talked about. You can recognize your own patterns in it. But recognition is not transformation. Action is. Let me be direct with you. If you leave this and go back to thinking, planning, waiting for the right time, you will reinforce the exact system that has been holding you in place. Not because you chose it consciously, but because you didn't interrupt it. And this is how most people lose years. Not through failure. Through hesitation disguised as preparation. So here's the standard. Not tomorrow. Not later tonight. Not when you feel ready. Now, you take one thing, just one, that you have been overthinking. You define the smallest possible action, and you execute it immediately, without negotiating with your mind. Because your mind will try. It will offer one more adjustment, one more angle, one more reason to delay. You do not engage. You move. This is discipline, not intensity, not emotion, precision. You are not trying to change your entire life in one moment. You are proving to yourself that you can override the loop. Once, cleanly. And that matters more than anything else. Because the first break in the pattern is everything. After that, it becomes easier. Not easy, but easier. Because now you have evidence. Evidence that you are not controlled by your thoughts. Evidence that action is available even when your mind resists. And once that evidence exists, you can build on it. Again, and again, and again, until the identity shifts. From someone who thinks to someone who acts. That is the line. And you either cross it now or you stay where you've always been. If you are ready to stop living inside your head and start executing in the real world, then don't treat this as just another video you watched and forgot. Subscribe, not for more information, but as a commitment to a higher standard of thinking and, more importantly, acting. Because from this point forward, the expectation is simple. You don't sit in the loop. You move.